Wyoming Territory, 1879. The wind howled over the dry hills outside Laramie, as if it knew Tamar Zell had just been sold like a barrel of whiskey. She stood still on the warped porch of the saloon, her hands clenched at her sides, the heavy red dust of the street clinging to the hem of her plain dress. Her father's voice still rang in her ears, slurred, careless, and final. "She's yours for $20 and a bottle of rye." Tamar did not cry. She had not cried in years. Not when her mother died of fever. Not when her father started gambling away everything they had. And not now, as the man who had bought her a rancher with smoke-yellow teeth and a face like sunburned leather reached for her arm. The hand never made it. A man stepped between them, tall and broad-shouldered, with a shadowed jaw and sharp green eyes that cut like glass. "She is not yours," he said, voice low and steady. The rancher barked a laugh. "I paid." "I do not care," the man said. "Let go of her." The rancher reached for his pistol. The man moved faster. One blow, a crunch of fist against jaw, and the rancher dropped. Dust billowed around his boots as he hit the ground. Tamar stared. "Are you hurt?" the man asked her, his tone softer now. She shook her head slowly. "No, I am taking you out of here," he said. "You do not belong to him. Or your father." "Who are you?" she asked, her voice cracking. He hesitated. "Ronan Keller." The name meant nothing to her, but the look in his eyes did. It was not pity. It was something steadier, like respect. They left Laramie before the sun fell. Ronan said nothing as he saddled his horse and helped her up behind him. His coat smelled like leather and pine. His hands were rough but careful. They rode through the night until the lights of Laramie were gone and the prairie stretched out like a dark sea. By dawn, they reached a small cabin tucked between the cottonwoods near the edge of Medicine Bow Creek. It looked like no one had lived in it for years, but it was clean, quiet, and dry. "I built this myself," Ronan said, unlocking the door. "Had not set foot in it since last winter." "You live here?" she asked. "No," he said. "I do not belong anywhere, really." Tamar stood in the doorway watching him light a fire. "Why did you help me?" He looked up from the hearth. "Because I know what it feels like. To be thrown away." Later, when she sat by the fire with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders and a cup of warm coffee in her hands, she asked, "What did you do? Why are you an outcast?" Ronan did not answer right away. He stared into the flames as if searching for something. "I killed a man," he said finally. "A sheriff. He was hurting my sister." Tamar's breath caught. "I turned myself in," he continued. "But the judge said my life was worth less than his. So I ran. Been running since." "Your sister?" she asked. "Gone," he said. "Fever took her last spring." She said nothing. She understood loss too well to offer shallow comfort. They spent the next few days in quiet rhythm. Ronan hunted, chopped wood, fixed the broken hinges on the door. Tamar cleaned, cooked, and watched him from the window when he thought she was not looking. He never touched her. Not once. He gave her the bed and slept near the fire. He spoke gently, and when he smiled, it was small and rare, like something earned. One morning, Tamar found him carving something by the creek, a small wooden bird. "For you," he said, handing it to her. "Figured you might like something that could fly." She held it in her hands, small and simple and perfect. No one had ever given her anything before, not just to give. "Thank you," she whispered. On the fifth night, as the wind howled again through the trees, Tamar stood by the fire and said, "If I stay, what happens?" Ronan looked up from sharpening his knife. "You can stay as long as you like. I will not send you away." "But what happens to you?" she asked. He shrugged. "Maybe someone finds me. Maybe not. I stopped worrying about it a long time ago. I have nowhere to go," she said. He looked at her then, really looked. "Then stay." She took a step toward him. "You saved me. No one ever has." "I did not save you," he said quietly. "You saved yourself. I just got you out." She reached out and touched his arm. His breath caught. "I do not want to be alone anymore," she said. Neither did he. But he did not kiss her. Not yet. Instead, he reached up and gently tucked a piece of her hair behind her ear. "Then you were not." The next morning, she woke up and found fresh biscuits on the table and Ronan already outside chopping wood. She watched him from the porch, holding the little wooden bird in her hands. And for the first time in years, Tamar smiled. The next week passed beneath a pale stretch of autumn sky, the kind that carried chill even when the sun was high. Tamar moved through the days with quiet purpose, mending a torn sleeve here, sweeping out the corners of the cabin there. She didn't ask questions about the land or Ronan's past. He didn't offer answers. Their silences were not uneasy. One afternoon, while she gathered kindling near the creek, she heard the low grunt of hooves behind her. She turned, heart-thudding, but it was only Ronan leading a pack mule down the slope, its sides loaded with sacks and a rolled wool blanket. He dropped the lead rope and handed her a canvas bundle. "Cloth," he said, "and sugar. Got it at a line camp north of Elk Mountain. Bartered pelts." She ran her fingers over the rough weave, surprised. "You went all that way? I figured you'd want to sew something for winter. And you've been boiling coffee grounds twice now." She folded the cloth carefully, setting it aside on a flat stone. "You remembered. I pay attention." She let the words settle, unsure what to do with the warmth they stirred. No one had ever brought her anything with her needs in mind, let alone without being asked. That evening, the wind shifted west and brought the first flurry of snow. Tamar stood at the hearth, twisting thread through a needle, while Ronan sat across from her, whittling something she couldn't quite make out yet. He paused, watching her stitch. "You sew like someone taught you proper." "My mother," she said, not looking up. "She used to make dresses for the women in town." Said it was the only work folks didn't question. "She around long?" "Not long enough." He didn't press. Instead, he turned the carved piece in his hand, the blade making careful scrapes. "I never knew mine." Tamar tied off her thread and set the fabric aside. "You said you built this place. Did you do it alone?" "I did." She glanced out the window. Snowflakes danced against the glass. "What made you choose this spot?" He leaned back in the chair, fingers stilling. "My sister liked the sound of the creek. Said it calmed her. After she passed, I came back and finished what we started." Tamar folded her hands in her lap. She must have been strong to make it as far as she did. "She was," he said quietly, "braver than me." The room settled into stillness again, the fire crackling between them. It was not the silence of strangers, but of two people learning how to share space without filling it. Later, she stood at the threshold, watching the snow gather on the fence rail. Ronan stepped up behind her, arms crossed loosely, not too near. "There's a family 2 ridges east," he said. "The Winslows. They keep to themselves, but they're good people. If you wanted to talk to someone who wasn't me." She turned to him, surprised. "Do you want me to go?" "No," he said, steady and sure. "I just know what it is to feel trapped, even when the doors open." Tamar looked down at her hands, pale in the cold light. "I don't feel trapped here." He nodded once, then pushed the door open wider. "Come spring, the creek'll rise. Cabin might need shoring. I'll teach you if you want to learn." "I do." That night, as the snow deepened, she lay awake beneath the quilt, listening to the wind outside. Ronan's breathing was slow and even from the pallet near the fire. She whispered into the darkness, knowing he wouldn't hear, "I don't want to lose this." The next morning, she rose early and found him already outside, hammering new boards into the shed. His sleeves were pushed back, breath visible in the cold air. She crossed the yard, her boots crunching in the snow. He looked up, and she held out a mug of warm broth. He took it with a nod, fingers brushing hers. "Thank you." She didn't pull away. "You never ask for anything," she said. "I was taught not to." "Well, I wasn't taught how to give. But I'm learning." He met her eyes then, and something unspoken passed between them, not sudden, not loud, but certain. They stood there in the cold, steam rising between them, hands almost touching. And for the first time, the silence felt full. By late November, the creek had begun to freeze at the edges, and the air held that stillness only winter could bring, a hush that settled into the trees and pressed itself into the bones. Tamar's hands were raw from the cold, Her knuckles chapped as she worked the washboard behind the cabin. She wore a pair of Ronan's old wool gloves, the fingers too wide, the cuffs folded twice to fit. Ronan returned from trapping just past noon, pulling a fox pelt from his pack and laying it over the rail. His coat was stiff with frost near the hem, and he moved slower than usual, favoring his right leg. "You're limping," Tamar said as she rinsed a shirt in the basin. "Caught it on a root coming downhill," he said. "Nothing deep." She dried her hands on her apron and stepped toward him. "Sit. Let me see." He hesitated, then lowered himself onto the porch step. She knelt beside him, rolling the fabric back above his boot. A long scrape bloomed across his calf, red and swollen. "You should have said something sooner," she murmured. "Didn't want to worry you. You were out before sunrise." "I've been worried since breakfast." He watched her fingers as she dabbed the wound with a cloth soaked in boiled sage. "You never say much about the kind of life you had before. I was taught it wasn't worth speaking of." He shifted, discomfort flashing in his eyes, not from the scrape, but something deeper. "Does it still feel that way?" She wrung out the cloth and folded it again. "No, not here." Ronan didn't speak for a moment. Then, "When I saw you that day in Laramie, I wasn't looking to bring anyone back. I don't know what made me step in." Tamar looked up. "I do." He met her gaze, the quiet between them thick with something unspoken. Then he reached for the flint knife beside him and began cleaning the pelt, careful, practiced strokes. That night, the wind picked up and rattled the shutters. Tamar stood by the small window, her arms folded against the draft. Behind her, Ronan added another log to the fire and stirred the stew pot. "I've been thinking," he said, glancing at her over his shoulder. "Come spring, we could fence the north pasture. The grass runs thick out there. Hides better from the wind." She turned. "You want me to help?" "If you're willing," he said. "It's your home, too." Tamar stepped closer, her breath catching faint in the warm air. "I never had one before." "Not really." He didn't look away. "Neither did I." She reached out and rested her hand on the table near his, not touching, just near. "What would we keep in that pasture? Maybe goats. Maybe cattle if we can manage the feed. We'd need a smokehouse." He nodded. "I can build one. Might take some time." "I'm not going anywhere." The words hung between them, steady and true. Ronan's shoulders eased as he returned his attention to the stew, but his hand brushed hers in passing just once, just enough. The days shortened, and the snow deepened. They worked beside each other without needing to fill the air with talk. Tamar stitched new curtains from the cloth Ronan had brought. He carved handles for the tools she favored. At night, they read from an almanac he'd kept in the loft, sounding out the long words slowly, like they were learning the shape of a new language together. One evening, she found him outside by the woodpile, standing still, the axe idle at his side. She approached, the snow crunching beneath her boots. "What is it?" "Tracks," he said. "2 riders. Passed through this way maybe an hour ago." Her jaw tensed. "Looking for you?" "Maybe. Could be someone else's trouble." She looked toward the trees, then back to him. "Do we need to go?" He shook his head. "We stay. We're not hiding." Tamar stood beside him, the cold leaching through her sleeves, but she didn't step back. "If they come, we face them together." Ronan turned to her slowly, his face unreadable in the fading light. "You mean that?" "I do." He reached out then, fingers brushing the edge of her scarf where it had loosened. "I've never had someone stand beside me like that. You have me now." He didn't kiss her. Not yet. But his hand stayed at her scarf, resting lightly, as if to anchor the moment in place. Inside, the fire waited. So did the quiet life they were building brick by brick, breath by breath. And as the first stars broke through the clouds above the cottonwoods, neither of them felt alone. The snow had held for days without deepening, leaving a brittle crust across the yard that crackled underfoot. Tamar spent the morning inside, turning dried rose hips into syrup over the fire, the tangy sweet scent curling into the rafters. Ronan was out near the ridge, checking the old trapline he'd rigged through the ravine. He hadn't said much when he left, only tapped the doorframe twice with his knuckles before stepping into the cold. By midday, she'd poured the last of the syrup into a sealed jar and set it on the shelf beside the salt. The cabin was quiet, but not lonely. She moved through it with the ease of someone who'd learned its rhythms, where the floor creaked, how the light shifted at noon, which window leaked cold along the sill. When Ronan returned, his coat was dusted white, and his cheeks were raw with wind. He carried a rabbit in one hand, his rifle slung low on his back. "There's cougar sign down past the bend," he said, setting the carcass on the block near the door. "Tracks are fresh. Might be hunting close." Tamar wiped her hands on her apron. "Do we need to move the chickens into the shed?" "Wouldn't hurt. I'll build a latch for the inner pen tomorrow." He hung his rifle on the peg and glanced at the kettle still simmering. "That for winter stores?" She nodded. "I boiled it longer this time. Should hold through February." He stepped closer, reaching past her to unhook a tin cup. "You've taken to this life like it was always yours." "I think maybe it was," she said, then hesitated. "Even if I didn't know it before." Ronan didn't speak right away. He poured from the kettle, the liquid steaming as it hit the metal. "I buried something out past the tree line last winter. Never told anyone." Tamar turned. "What was it?" "My sister's scarf. She wore it every day her last year. I couldn't stand to keep it in the cabin." She didn't ask why he was telling her now. She only said, "Would you want me to see where you laid it?" He glanced at her, his voice low. "Yes, but not today." She nodded once. "When you're ready." Later that afternoon, they moved the chickens. Tamar held the lantern as Ronan guided each bird into the shed, their feathers ruffling in protest. The cold bit through her sleeves, but she didn't flinch. When the last hen settled on the roost, she handed him the lantern and brushed snow from her skirt. "You said this land wasn't yours," she said, "but you walk it like it remembers you." He looked down at the ground beneath his boots. "Maybe I didn't want to belong to something that could be taken away." She stepped closer, her voice steady. "You belong here now, and so do I." His eyes met hers, unreadable in the dim light. "What does that mean to you?" "That I'll keep waking up beside that fire. That I'll cut wood and mend things and learn how to keep goats from wandering into the creek." Ronan set the lantern on the packed earth. "And if someone comes again like those riders, we face them," she said. "Same as we've done everything else." He reached for her hand, this time no hesitation, no pretense. His palm was rough, warm despite the cold. "I don't know how to be something for someone," he said. "You already are," she answered. Inside the cabin, the fire hadn't died down. Tamar added a log while Ronan unrolled the fur from his pack. They worked without speaking, the kind of quiet that had grown between them like a root deep, unseen, strong. As night fell, he handed her a folded length of scrap hide. "What's this?" she asked. "For your boots. You've been walking through snow in shoes that aren't made for it." She unfolded the leather slowly. "You made these?" He nodded. "Stitched them last week. Meant it as a surprise." Tamar looked up, and something in her face changed, softened, steadied. "You think of all the ways to make things better. Even the ones most wouldn't notice." "You notice," he said. "I do." That was the night she took his hand again, not out of fear, not for warmth, but because she wanted to, because it had become the most natural thing in the world. And when he leaned forward, slow, measured, waiting, she met him halfway. The kiss was quiet. No rush. No fire behind it. Just breath and trust, and something that had taken its time to grow. When they parted, she rested her forehead against his. "I don't want the life I had, Ronan. I want the one we make." He closed his eyes. "Then we'll make it." The wind rose outside, whispering through the cracks, but neither of them moved. The fire burned steady behind them, and the world, for that moment, held still. The first thaw came slow. Patches of earth began to show beneath the snow, dark and wet, and the creek cracked and shifted under its frozen skin. Tamar stood barefoot just inside the doorway, breathing in the smell of melting pine and damp soil. Her feet ached from the cold floor, but she stayed still, watching a single crow pick at something along the fence line. Behind her, Ronan was splitting the last of the winterwood. Each swing of the axe was measured, steady. She listened as the log split with a dull crack. "You're favoring your shoulder," she said without turning. "I'm not," he answered. She looked over her shoulder. "It's your left side. You're slower with it." He met her eyes, then leaned on the axe handle. "Trap snapped wrong last week. Pulled something. You didn't say. You didn't ask." She walked out barefoot, stepping over the icy mud, and took the axe from his hands. "Go inside." "I'll finish. You'll blister." "I've blistered before." He watched her grip the handle, her fingers sure. "You're stubborn." She raised the axe. "You like that about me." He didn't argue. By the time the last log was split, her palms were red and raw, but her breath came light. She wiped her hands on her skirt and looked up to find Ronan leaning against the cabin's side, watching. "You done?" he asked. "For now. You planning to ignore that cut on your thumb?" "I was." He pushed off the wall and walked over. "Come here." She didn't flinch as he wrapped a clean strip of linen around the cut. His fingers were warm, the bandage snug but careful. "You still thinking of goats for the pasture?" "I've decided on sheep," she said. "Wool's worth more. And I can cart it myself." He raised his eyebrows. "You know how. Mrs. Hollis taught me. She boarded with us one winter when I was 12. She said I had patient hands." Ronan tied off the bandage and stepped back. "Then sheep it is." That afternoon, they hitched the mule and rode into the ridgeline above the creek, scouting the fences. Tamar held the reins while Ronan pointed out where the old posts would need pulling, which corners the elk had trampled. They didn't speak much, just took the land in together its slow curves, the bare cottonwoods, the hawk flying low over the open flats. At the boundary line, Tamar dismounted and knelt, brushing snow from a pile of stones. She touched the flat one near the center, tracing its round edge. "This where you buried the scarf?" Ronan nodded from the saddle. She liked this view. She had good taste. They stood there a while, not needing to fill the stillness. Then Tamar cleared her throat. "If we're gonna keep sheep, we need shears, and a proper loom, maybe even a dye vat." Ronan turned his horse toward home. "We'll trade for what we can't build. And the rest, we build ourselves." That night, she found him working by lantern light, fitting a new latch to the shed door. She waited until he finished, then handed him a folded cloth. "What's this?" he asked. "Something I've been making from the cotton you brought." He opened it slow. Inside was a shirt, hand-sewn, the seams even and the collar square. "I don't need much," he said. "I know," she said, "but I wanted to make you something that fits." He ran his thumb along the stitching. "You think we'll ever be left alone?" Tamar stepped closer. "We already are." He looked up. "You sure?" "I know what it feels like to be waiting for something to go wrong. But nothing has. And I think it's time we stop expecting it to." He set the shirt down and took her face in both hands. "I never thought I'd have this." "You do." This time, when he kissed her, it wasn't quiet or careful. It was full with all the days they'd lived side by side, all the nights spent listening to wind and fire, all the work and small kindnesses that had stitched them together. Her arms went around his waist, and he didn't let her go. They were married in early April under the cottonwoods just as the first new leaves curled from the branches. The Winslow family came. So did the two trappers from the North Line camp and a weathered woman named Mabel who brought a pie and cried through the whole ceremony even though she barely knew them. Ronan wore the shirt Tamar had made. She wore a dress from the cloth he'd traded for that first week. They said their vows plain and honest and then shared bread and coffee beneath the wide blue sky. By midsummer, the pasture held 8 sheep and a low-built shed Ronan had roofed with his own hands. Tamar's loom sat near the window where the light was best. She worked it in the afternoons, her feet bare against the wood floor, her rhythm steady. Ronan built her a dye vat from stone and clay. When the fire beneath it burned, the cabin smelled of wildflowers and sage. They slept beside each other each night, the fire banked, the air warm from the day's sun. They didn't speak much before sleep. They didn't need to. In the quiet hours before dawn, Tamar sometimes woke and reached for him. He was always there. And when the wind rose through the trees, it no longer sounded like something lost. It sounded like home.